I'm so glad you're here. We are also glad you're here in the Center for Research on Teaching and Learning Excellence. And we are very proud and happy to have Dr. Matthew Crossan present on online learning. He's an expert in that area. I know he's fun. And so I'm going to turn it over to him, but we're just glad you participate in these seminars we host, and you're stay tuned for continuing because there's a part 2 to this that is going to be in July. So thank you for coming, and I'll turn it over to Matt.
Yes, I'm Dr. Matt Crossan. I work here at the Link Research Lab and for the center. I'm a researcher here. My focus is primarily on things that people call learning innovations or emerging technologies or future technologies, depending on where you work at. Can you hear me okay in the back? Do I need to stand up? Sorry, we don't have a microphone back here, but I'll try to talk as loud as I can. And I also work as a part-time faculty for the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. So I also teach online their online master's. So this session is hopefully going to be the start of a series of sessions where we look at not only online learning and kind of reimagining the basics of online learning, but also dive into some advanced topics. And I kind of wanted to trade off every other month between reimagining the basics and advanced topics. So next month, July 17th, will be a session on advanced topic in gaming and online learning. Basically looking at nonlinear pathways and how to build in options to your course. So please feel free to join us for that. And then 2 months from now, we'll go back to kind of reimagining the basics with looking at effective practices. So we'd be glad to have people join us for that. While my background is primarily in online learning, hopefully if you teach face-to-face or blended, this will help you in that as well. But if you have any questions about how this applies to face-to-face classes, please feel free to ask. If I can't answer it, hopefully someone else can. So we have several people in here who could actually probably teach this session, so they're probably here to mock me on Twitter or something. So please feel free to ask questions at any point, share your thoughts at any point as well. So, and we're also recording this later, so you can come back later and watch it. But I want to switch to sharing the screen. There, and start the presentation. Okay. So for these sessions, we do have a resource that we're going to kind of work through as part of these sessions. This is a book that we worked on, several people, myself and Brittany and Peggy, if she's here, several people at UTA, as well as some former UTA employees worked on this book. It's a free resource you can go and download for free online, or you can buy it for the cost of materials. It'll be about $10, $11 for the book itself. Shipping is about $500. Sorry about that. No, I'm kidding. It's not like $5. And this is one of the books. Oops, there's the information about it. This is a book through the Maps Open Press, and I wanted to give Michelle Reed a few minutes to plug the Maps Open Press. Yeah, if you could come up here somewhere to microphone, so I can hear you.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle. I am here representing Mavs Open Press. Thank you to Matt for the invitation to talk to you for a few minutes about our work. So Mavs Open Press is the publishing arm of UTA Libraries. We support OER adoption and creation, remixing of OER, as well as open access journals and to a lesser extent monographs. We're publishing a very broad spectrum of work produced by UTA scholars. In the OER space, and I have some flyers going around with information about OER. Matt was our first client, and we were very excited to be able to publish his work, collaboratively authored work, and see the very positive response that it has had and the impact that it's having, not just here at UTA, but across the country. So in this flyer, you will see some information about OER discovery. Me and a number of librarians at UTA can help you identify resources that you could transition to that will save your students money, which has a known impact on student success metrics. So we see students who use these kinds of resources have higher course grades. They tend to enroll in more hours. I'm looking through feedback from students who were enrolled in these courses in the spring, and it is positive across the board. It's amazing to see this kind of student feedback about our work. So, so we can help you with that. On the publishing side, we can help you get set up in a platform. We use Pressbooks for our OER publishing. So if you get into the online resource, you'll see the Pressbooks platform at work. Print as well. So we will provide your platform. We will provide technical support. We'll provide guidance and training on intellectual property rights, so you know how to proceed legally if you're remixing other people's work. And then we will also help you navigate through all of the various things you need to think about when you're either using open or affordable content. So check out the flyer. I won't take any more of your time, but if you need any help or are interested in learning more, get in touch. We're going to have our first community meeting about OER next Wednesday at 10 a.m. in Central Library. We have a Microsoft Teams that has all of our programming for the summer. We'll kick off a new series in the fall as well. If you're just here for a limited time over the summer, you can join us online as well. So I hope you will find something in all of this that's of interest to you, and again, get in touch if there's anything I can do to help. Is that good?
That's good. That's great.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so everything that I'm going to go through today is actually in this book. Also, what we're going through today, I also published previously before this book in a journal article. For some reason, I took that journal article and broke it in half and put it in the book. I need to revisit why I did that. Now I'm thinking back on it, it doesn't make much sense. But all this will work through some questions for you to ask yourself, and it culminates in a worksheet that you can use. And there's a worksheet on our website, and I have a few copies of it here that you can use to think through your course designs, your activities, and your theory, and see is everything lining up? Or maybe I want to try something different, and here's some options for trying something different. So, but we'll get to that by the end. All right, so we are here to talk theory. And if those of you who know me know that I like to talk a lot about theory. I'm almost like the Brady Bunch. It's always theory, theory, theory. It's Marsha with that because he likes theory. That's because of my background a lot in instructional design. We do a lot of theory in instructional design. There are people out there that say we all use learning theory even if we don't realize it. Would anyone agree or disagree with that statement, that we all use learning theory whether we realize it? No, you're all eating, so sorry, I'm asking a question. Anyone disagree with that? Good group here. I would change that a little bit to say that there are some theories somewhere that describe what we do, whether we realize it or not. And there are a lot of theories out there, and I am not going to cover all of them in this lesson. I put some further reading at the end if you want to look through. I looked at all the big Greek words that I can find about learning theories and looked at one list on a page of my website. But somewhere you can find something that in a general sense or a specific sense, sometimes a little too specific, can describe what you can do in learning. We're just going to go through a few of these today, and I'm not going to dive in very deep. So for the people in here that are already big into learning theory, I will apologize ahead of time. I'm going to have to abbreviate and shorten and kind of condense some things that will maybe make your skin crawl a little bit the way I do it. I apologize for that, but I don't want to make this a 5-hour session. So we want to kind of learn this, get some good tools, and help you get some stuff to help you with your courses. But like I said, if we recognize what we're doing, we can connect with more resources. I'll give you some words, some isms, some ologies that you can apply to your work, and you can go out and do searches and find more work on that, and find more research, and find more ideas, giving you some tools to help you broaden and think more deeply about the way you already are teaching. And on the flip side of that, if you want to try out something different, this gives you a marker to reach towards and some ideas to look for something maybe that's a little outside of what you want to do, so you can find those, be intentional about finding those new ideas. So when we talk about learning theories, one of the places I like to start off with, you can really start off anywhere, but where I like to start off with is who has the power in your course. And if you think about your course, you probably think of you as the instructor having power in the course. How many of you would admit that as the instructor you want to take most of the power in your course? I know I do for the courses that I do. If you were to come up with a word for putting the instructor in power, anyone want to take a guess at what that ism is? Teacherism, learnerism. Any guesses?
Yeah, same thing. Both. I would say both. Like teacher is the classroom teaching, like as a and also learner. So continuously we're learning and teaching. And whenever I teach, I consider myself like a ship captain. Like my classroom is like a ship, and I'm captain of that ship and taking in the right direction.
Yeah. That's true. The ism that most commonly goes along with this is not, they didn't put a whole lot of thinking into it, they call it instructivism, or the instructor is even at the center. You could also look at things like behaviorism, kind of fit underneath this, but this is the idea that your instruction is knowledge transfer from the expert to the learners. Now, if we took this the other side and put the student as, let's say, the power in each class. Has anyone tried any student-centered learning like that? We have a few. I tried it a little bit myself. What would you think the ism for that would be called? Learnism?
Agencyism.
Agencyism?
Yeah.
Those are all great guesses, but that's kind of a trick question. There isn't one. They just call it student-centered learning. Sorry about that. There are several that fall underneath what we would generally consider student-centered learning. The two I want to look at are constructivism and connectivism. Now with these, if you're talking about how people learn, I realize there's some controversy about how the brain actually learns. I'm not going into this. I'm talking about how we structure our courses to help students do that learning. So in constructivism, it can be constructive self-discovery with the rod of guide, and connectivism is a newer one which looks at the learning that we do within the networks we form, either by going online, looking at that network, by talking to people like this, and those kind of things. I don't want to necessarily look at these as three separate ideas that compete with each other, or one is better than the other. I'm not going to play favorites with any of these. Well, one later on will be my favorite. We'll get that. But I don't want to look at these as one's better than the other. But for the sake of this talk, and those of you who really like theory, don't get mad at me for this, but this is just to help us kind of organize these thoughts. I want to look at it as kind of a continuum, from constructivism to constructivism to connectivism. So if you have, say, constructivism that leans more towards a person being guided, it's more instructivism. You have constructivism that's more towards the self-discovered network, it would be more on this side. Think of them kind of as a continuum rather than three separate ideas, because you might, as some of you are looking at this, you're thinking, I kind of use some of all of these in my learning. I don't necessarily stick with one, and that's okay. That's what most of us do. But if you favor towards instructivism, where students are always doing just what you tell them to, are they really developing independent thinking skills? So we want to think of these as ones that you can kind of move back and forth in between. So after power dynamics, we also have what I refer to as methodology. And this is where we get into the Greek words and a lot of fake Greek words as well. So what is probably the most well-known Greek word for learning in education? Is pedagogy. Pedagogy, right? We've all heard of pedagogy, right? So pedagogy is the most well-known one. Hit the wrong button. It actually is a real Greek word that goes back to ancient Greek times. It basically means to lead the child. Basically, in Greek times, a pedagogue would be the one who came into your house and taught your children. Through time, it has kind of morphed into a term that some people look at as a term for all of learning design. Any type of learning design for any person anywhere sometimes falls into the term pedagogy. For those of you that, like me who are into theory, that's a problematic thing, so I like to dial it back a little bit and just look at it as the instructor at the center of and in control of the transmission of what is taught. It's not that the students don't make any choices, but the instructor is kind of the one who's guiding it. A lot of people associate it with giving lectures, but it's not just lectures. It can also be a guided discussion. It can also be some projects where students choose what topic they want to write their paper or do a project on. So I want to look at it this way because I want to talk about two other methodologies. So does anyone know the other ergogy that's usually put as the opposite of pedagogy?
As the opposite?
Not necessarily the opposite, but difference.
Andragogy?
Andragogy, right. Andragogy is typically, is often sometimes looked at as adult-centered learning, but the line between when someone's a child and adult is really kind of fuzzy because when you start getting into high school and college especially. So a lot of people rather look at it as a methodology that draws on life experiences and knowledge of the learner. So as I ask you questions about what you think and what you know, that's me trying to draw an andragogy, trying to pull you in and talk about that. And that kind of forms the basis. Probably a lot of you do that on college courses because that you're hoping to transition them to use this knowledge out there so they have to think more than just follow what they're told. Then, does anyone know my favorite agaji I talk about all the time? Anagogy. I'm like that one up now. I didn't make this word up though, so. The word is hyudagogy. You might have heard me say that, but just didn't remember how to pronounce it. But that's good. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong too. Hyudagogy is something that came about a few decades ago, that focuses more on self-determined learning, where the learners, instead of focusing on what learners will learn, you focus on teaching them how to be a learner. Instead of telling them what they need to know for, say, engineering projects, you would look at telling them where to go to be a learner about engineering or nursing, whatever it may be. It is, I said I wouldn't play favorites, but it is my favorite, but it's also one of the more difficult ones to get to in learning. And anyone want to give a guess of why you think this would be one of the more difficult learning methodologies to attain to in a classroom?
They want to know what's on the test.
They want to know what's on the test. Yeah.
They don't want to be in charge.
They don't want to be in charge? Yeah.
Process is always difficult.
Process is difficult, yes. Exactly, all of this. Yeah, because the learners are not used to it. They're used to following what's on the test. They're not used to being in charge. They don't know what to do. There's a difficult process for it. So while I like to strive for that myself in my own teaching, I realize that I still have to rely a lot on pedagogy and andragogy to get to hyudagogy. And sometimes I don't think we really get there a whole lot. I just finished teaching a course on student-centered learning, and I don't think we've quite got to hyudagogy, even though we tried for one lesson. But it's something that you kind of work towards, and they see it a little bit more and more over and over again. They possibly get to the place of starting to think for themselves. But it is a difficult one, even though it is my favorite. So now, if you've been looking through all these words that I've been throwing up here, you've probably seen several of them that, like, I like that one and that one. I like constructivism, but I also kind of like andragogy as well. Or I like the hyudagogy, but also the connectivism as well. Can I do both? And I would say that yes, you can. I'm about to put something up that is rather messy, and again, the learning theory people in the room might get a little upset at me doing this, but I like messy things, and I think it's a good place for experimentation. So what I've done, and this was back in my article, so it was peer reviewed, so I guess it's okay now. It's peer reviewed, perfect, right? I basically put the 3 isms down one side and the 3 agajis across the top, and I came up with a chart, something like this. Now then, like I said, this is messy. You don't want to think of these lines as hard barriers between them as much as they just kind of fade into each other. And some of them, I'm still not sure if they can actually be a thing, like an instructivist type of hyudagogy, where they're basically self-determined but following the instructor at the same time. I don't know, but I've learned to never say never. As soon as you say you can't do that in education, someone comes up and does it, right? But if you're looking at some of these and say, instructivist pedagogy, you want, because your students are brand new to this topic, and your students need guidance, they need your help, they need you to show them what to do, then you might look at, say, an instructivist pedagogy. And in these slides, I'm not going to go through each one of these, don't worry, we don't have that much time. But I've gone through these slides and kind of given each one a little bit of a description of what I think it might end up looking like. Okay, so for example, instructive pedagogy, this is formal learning that depends on the instructor to dispense knowledge that is new to the learners. Right, and then on the next slide, I've also added some suggestions, like focus on content, video, standardized tests, papers. You might also look at some of these and say, you know what, I have different learners who would have different needs in one class. So I might have to try several of these in one class. But let's So I just want to run through a few of these. They say one of these really speaks to me and I want. Let's talk about that one.
Constructivist pedagogy.
Constructivist pedagogy. Had to pick the hardest one. Okay, that's okay. Like I said, this is probably unlikely, but this would basically be an expert sharing information about where to learn about a topic. For example, if you came up with a list of resources and professional communities, learners can join Be More. This is what we actually did or attempted to do in my student-centered learning class. The classes I teach are on a quarterly system, 7 weeks each. So summer 1 just ended a week ago, summer 2 starts today. There's an announcement today. I just forgot about that. But we gave them a lesson and said, you're going to learn how to create a mobile app. But here's a place you go to take the lessons on mobile learning, but you pick. And then you go for it. And I'm going to step back until you come back and say, here's the mobile apps that I've created. So I think it still kind of drifts back this way, in this area. Like I said, it's hard to get over to pedagogy unless you get down here with connectivist pedagogy. But we at least tried. So another one, anyone else wants to hear about? Anything else speak to anyone? Hey,
Connectivist pedagogy.
Connectivist pedagogy. Which again would probably be one of my favorites. Learners work within a network to figure out how to become a learner about a topic. They're kind of on their own. They're kind of in a network. They're kind of out there online doing their own thing. Of course, this is the college campus, so we do have to public universities, so we have to be careful about those kind of things. But it can work. Some examples of it, the self-determined learning in a network. Some of you have heard of rhizomatic learning. That's basically there is no syllabus. You just let the students. You can Google this. A guy named Dave Cormier created this. Other student-centered activities. This is probably where you get the closest to true student-centered learning. Like I said, you can also kind of float in between several of these. This just gives some guides.
I don't know what it means. Rhizomatic.
Rhizomatic, yeah. That's based on rhizomes in biology and how they kind of guide themselves and self-replicate. If you actually look in the book, there's a section there, rhizomatic learning. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with it myself, so that was about the one I could find that fit the best. So
I did something that was sort of in the middle of all of this, and my students rioted at the beginning. But by the end of the semester, when we actually accomplished building a website with non-graphic design students about our content, they were very pleased with what they had done. But it was so difficult the entire semester.
Yeah.
But thankfully, they were happy at the end.
Yeah. My students were like, "Are you sure I can pick any apps for how to use?" Like, yeah, go for it.
We had
go off the website? Sure, go off the website. You can find some of it. Yeah.
We had a class where we actually called customer service for Wix.com, which is where they were building that. Yeah. And the poor guy that got us, because we all sat around the table and they were like, "Oh, I have a question." And I'm like, "Guys, call customer service if you don't. I don't know how to do this. We have to learn this together." So there's some life skills learned.
I think it's like the communities that help you with open source software.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been in a few of those. I love those. Yeah. Or sometimes I hate them because they just don't answer what you want. But yeah, sometimes I love them too. And I'll tell you, when my students finished up their student-centered learning class, or when they finished up the activity where they were doing student-centered learning, I got to play with so many fun mobile apps that they all created. I was running through Minecraft. I was doing some of the like Flappy Birds. I was doing like pick your favorite basketball teams. I mean, it was pretty fun. It kind of. And I realize not every topic can go kind of off the rails like I did with that one. But sometimes you also end up with some fun stuff to grade for yourself as well. So, like I said, this I've put this. Presentation slides online. This is also in the book. It's already on our website on the page where you signed up for this course, so you can go get this if you want to kind of look through these. Another thing you can also do with this is that you look at this and say, you know what? I think in my class I would like to have ill-defined problems based on life experiences that are worked on by the learners as part of a network. Then you can see, well, this is kind of where I'd be interested in. Now, how do I work towards that? A lot of times we look at this to kind of classify what we've already done, but I also like to look at this the other way to kind of give us something to work towards with our learners as well. And realize that, like we've been talking about here, there's no perfect way to do any of these. So it's some of this will be experimental. So now that we've talked some of the theory of power structures and methodology, we also want to get to another important part of theory, which is communication. Would anyone say that you teach a course that uses no communication whatsoever?
Not very well.
Not very well. Like sometimes I'd like to, but no. But the reality is that we do use communication. And what I found out when I was teaching my students in the student-centered learning class is that several of them got student-centered learning very well. Some of them put all the pieces of student-centered learning together, but they were still following the instructor to the end. I had to talk with them about, okay, this is a really good lesson you put together, but they're still following you step by step. You put all these, you're giving them some choices in there, but who's still at the center and how are you communicating that to where the students really felt that they are taking control of their learning the way that the goal was. And so that's kind of how I like to do grades instead of a final due date. They try and meet early and we talk about it. So one important way to look at this is what are the types of communication we're using and do they fit well with the methodology and power structure that we've chosen? When I talk types of communication, this is stuff that has been published on. The first person published on this in 1989, I believe, and he identified 3 types of communication in learning. And this is not rocket science, right? This is, and this symbol means it can go either way. You just they didn't write out, 50 of these to try to get all different ways. But student to teacher, student to student, student to student. Then a few years later, someone came along and said, well, wait a second, they're also communicating with their interface, their computer and things. Let's add this. And then a few years later, someone else came along and said, well, we're kind of leaving the teacher out of this. So we got to get the types of communication that happen in between teachers and into the teacher and the content as they design it. And also as the content is starting to communicate with other content, we're starting to get algorithms and those kind of things that are happening. Then someone else came along and said, well, we forgot about the groups. Okay, so we got to put the groups in there, right? Because we do have groups in learning. Hello. So group to content, group to group, student group, teacher group. And then when connectivism came along, people realized that there was this network out there that was helping people to communicate. They had a 12th one, which is networked with people or computers. And if you look at the way that technology is going for the future, as algorithms become more complicated, as our systems start communicating with those algorithms to help students, maybe say persist across courses or not drop out, you could see these expand even more between system and algorithm and student, algorithm and algorithm. It could get a lot more complex. I don't know, but I did put together, there's a link at the end, you can see where I put together a list of 8 more possible classes today. So just buckle up for that one, because that's going to get really complicated once your algorithms are talking with each other and you don't know what they're saying about you behind your back. So that's basically how the forms of that communication can happen in learning. And that can also be important if you have, say, instructivists, if you want to do instructivism, but you're looking at students communicating with each other, and the students are kind of lost because you didn't work in some kind of teacher-student communication, right? There are also the forms of those communications take, and for this I want to rely on a theory that you probably haven't heard of called LTCA theory. This is Dr. Scott Warren at the University of North Texas. Just for full disclosure, he was on my dissertation committee. Did not require me to put this in here, but I liked it, so I put it in here. But what this is basically learning and teaching is communicative actions. It's a theory based on the work of Jürgen Habermas. Anyone in here like Jürgen Habermas? Anyone hate him? I saw some faces back there, so apparently some of you are familiar with him. You're like, oh, what? Yeah, Dr. Warren says he reads Habermas's work every year until he understands about 25% of it. So it's a rather complex theory. I don't recommend you going to Habermas, but there is a paper at the end where you can read more about this theory. It looks at the form that our communication takes. For example, normative communicative actions, or how you communicate the norms for your class. These are our class rules. This is how we're going to do things. This is how we're going to be nice to each other, not yell at each other for those kind of things. Then there are Strategic communicative actions. This is, your textbooks, your lectures, other methods where you transmit the information to the learner. Videos, books, those kind of things. There are constitutive communicative actions. This is where you have some of the discourse, debates, discussions. Hopefully not arguments in your course. Those aren't necessarily bad, but sometimes they can spiral out of control. But if you look in the literature, he does mention arguments in there. This can take place face-to-face. It can take place online, synchronous in a discussion. It can also take place in a paper. They write a position paper where they're trying to argue. Just because someone doesn't argue back with them doesn't mean that they're not making a positive communication. And then we have dramaturgical communicative actions. This is purpose of expressions. It could also be a paper, but it could be creating a project, artifact, video, piece of art, something like that. These were the four that he identified. And I've kind of just wondered, since Dr. Warren also kind of comes from the same educational background that I come from as far as the academic field of education. Now that we have a lot of people from different backgrounds in there, I've always wanted to ask, can you think of any other type of communicative actions that might happen within your field? And I'll say they cover art, they cover writing papers.
Technical, communicative, like within perhaps a performing arts kind of thing, being specific with the technical aspects of it, the building the sets and the lighting design and those kind of specific design elements.
All right, to make the later on part. That could be one. Yeah.
Therapeutic or affect oriented.
Yeah, that's a good one.
How about non-verbal?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. They're all good ones, but that happens. Think about it. I'm kind of taking notes next time I talk to them. I might say, hey, what about these? So.
Like a social awareness communicative action, like in order to be more socially minded, socially active, to learn those skills in order to better participate, ideally, in society.
Social skills.
Yeah, or even activism, social activism, communicative.
Yeah, social activism, yeah. I also think there's probably one you could probably think about, maybe some type of cross-cultural community actions where you have to understand not only your specific socio-cultural context, but others as well, and how you maybe commute across them. I don't know what one word I would choose to label that, but that might be an important one. Well,
so when I look at the maybe it's virtual, but there's a lot like imitation, like for teachers, teachers, they will imitate what we demonstrate. I guess it's a way of communicating that verbally, but it's also kind of the last one you have there, dramaturgical.
Yeah, these little words all came from your Habermas, so that's why they're all a little one. Yeah. This is good. I've always been curious about that. I wanted to take some notes, talk to him about that. If he's still working on it, we'll see. But I like these, at least for a beginning place to start thinking about. If you are looking at, say, doing some kind of connectivism, but all of your community strategies are normative or even strategic, that's something you have to think about and say, wait a second, am I really doing communicative actions that's going to help the power structure and methodology that I'm going to use in this course? So that's what I'm kind of aiming towards with all of this theory that we're talking through here, is that getting to a place of helping us all to, myself included, so I'm thinking through this going, I need to change this in my course, this in my course. But evaluate what we're doing in our course and make sure there's some good alignment between what our intended power structures are, what our intended methodologies are, what our communicative actions are, and what our communicative forms are. And so to help that, I came up with an actual worksheet that you can go through with this. I have some paper copies here. I know some people don't like getting paper copies. They're just going to put in the trash. There is a digital version of this online. It's a PDF form. It's actually pre-filled. Some of these words, you just pick them out and drop down. You don't have to remember how to spell Hudagaji or any of those kind of things. You just drop down. But for those who want a paper copy or just want to look at it, I pass around. You can share or take Or just remember also the Word doc is online too, so you can download your own copy and print it up if you want to. This leads you through some questions that you can kind of ask yourself, either at the course level, at the lesson level, at the activity level, however you want to look at it, depending on what your course is. Some of those questions that I just put here in the PowerPoint for people who are looking at this later. You ask yourself first, of course, what's the main power structure of your course or your level or your lesson or your activity? And then you want to say, what is the main reason for this selection? And you're not answering that for me. There are no theory police on campus who are going to come around and tell you you're wrong, okay? This is for you. If you can't give yourself a good reason for why you chose this power structure, then you've got to think, why is that so? Maybe I need to choose a different one. And then also you could think through what other power structures could possibly be in the course. And you could also just skip what I've said and said, there's these other isms out here that I like better than what Matt said. Go with those as well. So this is kind of another catch-all to think that you don't have to stick with one in your course. Next section, it goes into methodology, the pedagogy, andragogy, pedagogy. You choose which one you would like for your course or your lesson activity. And then again, just answer for yourself. Why am I using this? Do I have a good reason for using this? If not, then where's the problem at? This is really designed for self-reflection more than anything else. But again, if someone comes and questions something that you've done, and you can say, well, I've got it right here. This is what I thought through. These are all the theories that are backing it up. So this would be another helpful tool in that way as well. And other methodologies could possibly use in the course. Like I said, I think I found 20-ish agogis out there, peeragogy, aggregagogy, learnagogy. They're all out there. So there's others you can add there as well. I picked the 3 that I think would be most helpful for a college education campus, but there are more you can go into. And again, there'll be a link at the end to look at that list that I will keep adding to as I find as well. And then at the bottom of the paper, you want to look at what types of interaction do you want in your course. Student to student, student to teacher, student to group, what do you want there? List several of those, list one, depends on your lesson. Then think about, do the power dynamic and methodology match up? Each one match up, yeah. I had a typo in there, sorry. Okay, do they match up? And think through the types of communications you want and the methodology and the theories you have, do they match up? Then think about the activities or the sub-activities you have and list those. List the communicative actions that you would use to accomplish those. And then list the methodology and power structure behind it. And then basically what you're doing is just looking for these types of things to align. And if there's not an alignment, but you have a good reason for them not aligning, then that'll be something to think through. But then hopefully this will also give you a tool that if you, like I said earlier, if you want to try something new, you might start at the bottom of the worksheet. Say, hey, I want to get to those ill-formed problems and this, so I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way back up these questions and get to these other things to make sure that from the beginning of the course, I'm communicating what I need to the students to get to the desired outcomes. So really, I want this to look more like a self-reflective time and also a way to help instructors branch out as well. Look at some different ideas that maybe they haven't tried before. Like I keep talking about, like you could try these student-centered things, but you may be a very student-centered instructor and think, well, I need to try some more instructor-centered things. Lost in there, so. And if you're really interested in what you could do with this, you could also have your students fill this out for you. But maybe some of your other students fill it out, see what they would think about the course, and maybe get some feedback from them on how they think your course structure is matching up. You would probably have to, talk to them about some of these words, but that I don't know. I haven't tried that yet myself. I have to try that because I'm a little scared too, though. But they try it. So for further reading, of course, we have the book, the article. You can look at the different lists of learning agogis that I came up with, different type of interactions that those 12 interactions are saying, especially if you're like, say, computer science or engineering, well, not quite exactly. I need some other ones. I came up with some other ones for you there. Also, this article on the differences between pedagogy, andragogy, and pedagogy is very good. It has a very good chart on it to help you work through the differences between the three. It is within the context of maker education, as far as maker spaces and maker bots and those kind of things. But it still works for other So it's one that I would recommend. And then this article is actually a research in Twitter, a research study in Twitter, but it has a good section, and then it looks at the learning and teaching of community action, so you can see more about those different works that we've run out there if you want to read about it. The rest of the study is interesting as well, as you can kind of look at the lit review section for information on that. I don't think it's really published anywhere else other than that. So that is kind of the main gist of what I wanted to go through, but I want to leave some time at the end for questions.
And when will we be able to access your slides here?
They're already up. I hit the publish button 5 minutes before 12. They are up on the website. Now, if you go onto the Link Lab website, on the page where the form was, the description was, they're now up there. Recording of this will also be up there once it's done.
So talk about online course. How do you start the learning over to the students? What do you do to make that happen? Connect to this, construct this?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Basically, what I do is, of course, I'm basically an adjunct, so the course is given to me, but it's in the program that I got my master's from, so they're doing a lot of what they taught me, luckily. But they have instructions for it online, and then I have a weekly online session where I meet with any learners that have any questions. That's where a lot of questions come out. Even if there's only 2 students that show up, maybe 5, maybe 2, but there's a lot of questions that come out. And I record those questions and post the video, record the session. As far as the actual lesson, the design, it really just comes down to detailed instruction and anticipating the questions they may have, putting those questions up there ahead of time. And then if they come up with a lot of questions that you missed, then take note of those and put it in for next time. So, we do try to give them a lot of guidance on that. As far as we don't just, I never just say, go out there and learn, Here's a topic, mobile apps, go have fun, But we point at specific sites and say, this specific site, here's 3 specific lessons you consider. And then I get a lot of them that just come back and take those 3 lessons, right? But then say you can look at the rest of the apps on this one site, or you can look at other websites if you want to try something else. And they will almost always come and ask me if they can try this other thing. I never tell them they have to, but they always want to come ask me, can I try this one? Yeah, that sounds great. Can I do this one? Sure. So that's kind of the basic gist of it.
I'll call office hours, the session that you have online with the students, because I had online office hours for 2 semesters now, and the first semester I had 2 students who participated, and last semester I had 1. Now those particular students participated a lot, but this was in over 100 students were in the class. So was there a particular time, or was it required? Did you call it? You probably did not call it office hours. How do you get that engagement?
Well, I do. Sometimes I do a little bit of mental trickery in there. I tell them that they're going to get free feedback and free responses from me. For some reason, calling it free, all of a sudden they're there. It was free all along. But I know as I asked my students, I said, you can turn in your work to me early, and I will tell you how you're doing, right? And like, that's it. I started saying, well, if you turn to me early, I'll give you free feedback. And all of a sudden, the mom starts turning it in. I don't know what it was, but what time of day I do it is when I teach. One thing is my second job. I have to do it at nights a week anyway. And so, but most of the students in this course are also working full time as well. So I do it on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. So, and a lot of them still can't make it. They just tell me they can't make it, but they watch the recording later. So I don't know if there's any secret to one that works there. So it's kind of you have to know your students the best.
Is this in addition to office hours?
No, it's still on.
This is your office hours.
Yeah.
But do you call it office hours?
Actually, no, I don't. I haven't thought about that, but I also don't have a phone since I'm an adjunct, so I have to tell them they have to email me or show me this with 2 options.
We don't have phones.
Okay, well, that's nice. I'll ever use the ones over there. So.
So you may have part B, what you mentioned for this presentation. So is that where you cover possibly how to for all the theories or some of the theories?
Yeah, that's the next one that we're going to do in this series is on effective practices. A lot of that. It's the things we used to call best practices until we figured out that what works best in one course doesn't work best in another course, what works best for one student. So I just call them effective practices in different scenarios. So a month from now, we're going to do the gamification series, which might also help some of this as well, as far as creating non-linear content. Primarily, the tool called Twine helps you build non-linear content. And then 2 months from now, I'm going to plan on doing the effective practices session. So hopefully we'll cover that. Questions? Any other questions?
Next one is July 17th.
Yeah, July 17th.
Same time, same place.
Yep.